and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very excited because we're going to be talking about Hooker's rising cards. To me, now there's been a lot of discussion in recent years about any card at any number, which goes back to Spreckels, right? I mean, he was really the father of that effect, the one who made it popular. And since he brought it to the magic fraternity, there have been countless variations, countless attempts to make it so that you could do it table hopping or improvisational. Is sort of the card effect of our time. But if you go back before Spreckels, if you go back before that, a few years before that, the Hooker rising cards was probably the pinnacle of card magic. It was the effect that is legendary. In fact, it is so legendary that some have even questioned the possibility that it ever existed in the first place. There have been a number of books written about it. There have been a number of articles written about it. This particular image is John Gahn and Jim Steinmeier on the set. Now, John Gahn was able to get a hold of the original apparatus, and I believe it was in 2007. I have my notes here. Let me just check real quick. 2007, John Gahn replicated the effect for a Magic History Convention. We'll get to that in a minute, but I just wanted you to take a look. That's John, that's Jim. This is the set right here. He was able to actually perform it. Now, he said that it took him and his crew a solid 2 days to set up and get ready to do the effect. So it gives you some idea of how complex the effect is and what it takes to actually pull it off, and probably why it's not done. Hooker owned his own theater. It was not a commercial theater. It was part of his home, but he invited guests by invitation only to come and watch the performance of this effect. But I wanted to bring it to your attention because I don't think it's getting the attention it deserves. And I will say this also. If we're comparing the pinnacle of card magic, if we're comparing maybe the greatest card effect of all time, I would like to suggest, and this is just I would like to suggest that the Rising Cards is superior to any card at any number. If you ask a layman, what is magic? The layman will probably refer to some type of levitation. I'm telling you, ask a layman. If you don't believe me, ask one. They will probably refer to some type of levitation. And the Rising Cards, it's a levitation. And it's a levitation that's normally done close up. Of course, Howard Thurston made his reputation as a magician based on the Rising Cards. In Howard Thurston's version, he would hold his hand above the deck and the card would rise up to his hand, and then he would throw it to the person who selected the card. So there were a number of things going on in Thurston. By the way, I actually held in my hands Thurston's Rising Cards, the very one, and George Goebel allowed me to do that. George Goebel owned them, and that was quite an experience. But I do believe that the Rising Cards is an effect that if you've stopped or if you haven't paid attention to it, I think you should go back and revisit it. Now, there are a number of different variations. There's a variation that I do that perhaps we can talk about. In the one that I prefer, the cards are placed in a houlette. The houlette is held by me and by a spectator. It swings and the cards rise out of that. I love the isolation of that. But the Hooker card rise stands alone as not only one of the greatest magical effects in magic history, but probably, in my opinion, the greatest card effect in history as well. So Hooker's Rising Cards. Samuel Cox Hooker was his name. Born April 19th, 1864 in England. He found his way to the United States October 12th, 1935, he crossed over. His father presented him with a box of tricks when he was 12 years old. He mastered those tricks. He became passionate about magic. His dad took him to see Mascleen and Cook, the great Mascleen and Cook. He was enamored by that performance. He developed plate spinning. You know, Mascleen used to do plate spinning. So Samuel Cox Hooker learned how to spin plates. He also replicated the famous spirit cabinet, which is the effect upon which Mascleen and Cook built their reputation. He performed as a magician throughout his teen years. He studied the work of Hoffman's Modern Magic, and he also studied Robert Houdin's Secrets of Conjuring and Magic. He considered and wanted a career as a professional magician, but his father encouraged him to study science and chemistry, and so that's what he did. When he was 17, Samuel entered the Government Science School in South Kensington, London, studying under Professor Huxley, and after 2 years of work, Hooker was awarded a scholarship in chemistry. In 1884, he studied chemistry at the Royal College of Science in London and the University of Munich. In 1885, he came to the United States. In 1887, he married Mary Elizabeth Owens of Cincinnati, with whom he had 2 daughters and 2 sons. He became the director of the American and Spreckels sugar refining companies. Between 1913 and 1915, he retired, and he developed his own theater based in his home, and he began to perfect the rising cards. He retired at the age of 51 because he was wealthy enough to do so. He had amassed a fortune as an American chemist and entrepreneur. He was able to retire wealthy at the age of 51 and devote the rest of his years to perfecting this one effect. Now imagine being a magician, but spending all of your time perfecting just one thing. That's what this man did. And I think he deserves the recognition for doing that. And I think that the magic community should pay a lot more attention to this effect, in my opinion. He bought a 3-story double-width brownstone at 82 Remsen Street. He converted the carriage house at the back. Now this was in Brooklyn Heights, New York, okay? He converted the carriage house at the back of the garden to a workspace. He had the ground floor of the carriage house was converted into a chemical lab. The second floor of the carriage house was converted into a magic studio. Hooker installed a small stage at one end of the room, second story, and that's where he performed this card rise. In 1914, he had devoted himself, by 1914, he devoted himself to the one trick, the rising cards. Now in 1914, he was doing a version of this. Any card called for would rise out of the deck. But he would continue to refine that, and I'm going to give you the exact effect in just a moment. Harry Keller saw one of the first demonstrations of the effect in May of 1914. It hadn't been perfected yet. It wasn't what it was going to be, but Keller went and saw it. He'd retired 6 years before, but he saw it in 1914. His first effect was to cause any named card to rise from the deck, but he continued to hone it. By 1918, this is what the effect looked like. Now I'm going to give you each bullet point. This is what the effect looked like. All the cards were shuffled together by an audience member and replaced in the roulette. When a particular card was named by the audience, that card rose out of the deck. If the face card was named, the face card rose out of the deck. A ring was passed over the roulette, and the cards seemed to follow instructions provided by the audience, rising or lowering as requested by an audience member. The deck could be borrowed. A reversed card shuffled into the deck quickly rose into view. Another signed card rose after a requested number of cards had already risen from the deck. Cards not only rose from the deck, but now levitated above the houlette, so they were free floating. When a glass bell jar was placed over the deck, this card continued to rise to the top of the bell jar, then descended again. Other cards, as requested, jumped straight out of the houlette as if catapulted into the air. Replacing the bell jar, the entire deck cascaded into the air and to the top of the glass dome, an imitation of Dakota's famous card fountain. His most important addition over the period of years was the co-star, the disembodied teddy bear head that he called Multi-80s. Multi-80s. In 2007, Johnny Gahn gave a reenactment during the Conference on Magic History, and that's what's pictured right here. Now, if I haven't stimulated your imagination with that description, I don't know what will. I think this is one of the greatest effects in the history of magic. I think the rising cards itself, no matter what version you're doing, is one of the greatest card effects you can do, but this is the absolute pinnacle of that effect. Now, there are some references I want to leave you with. The Hooker Rising Cards by John Mulholland Pallbearer Review, Volume 2, Number 6, April 1967. Genie Magazine featured an article on the Johnny Gahn version and also gave an excellent history of the Hooker card rise, April 2008. If you didn't know this, if you subscribe to Genie, go to your online Genie Magazine. In the column over on the right, you can select past issues. You can go straight to April 2008. You can read this article. I suggest that you do so. There's also a Magicpedia article that you can refer to if you want more information. But hey, folks, you know what? I think this is... I never got to see it performed. As far as I know, there's not a visual record of John doing the effect. But I think it's amazing. It's one of those things that I fantasize about. Imagine handing a deck to an audience. They shuffle the deck. They give it back to you. You drop it in a houlette. Another audience member names any card, and that card floats out of the pack and into the air. That's the essence of the effect, and it is extraordinary. So I hope I've wet your whistle a little bit. If you didn't know about the Hooker card rise, now you do. I hope you go out and do some research, and I'll tell you what else. I hope some of you will begin to work on similar effects. Hooker could not do this effect away from his home. It wasn't something you could pack flat and take anywhere. It wasn't something you could do in a restaurant. It wasn't something you could do impromptu. It took a lot of work. It took John Gahn 2 days to set the thing up. I think there's a way to do this effect, or at least a variation of it, in a practical manner. And I don't know the way yet. I don't have the method yet, but I've been working on it. It's been in the back of my mind for 40 years at this point. And I believe I'm going to find it. And if you find it, let me know. Because I really think we should put our collective minds together and come up with something that works, that's practical. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please comment down below. I really want to hear those comments about this card rise. Please subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you so much. Have a great day.